Which Miami Dolphins talents under contract in 2025 may make sense to try to proactively get a contract extension done with this offseason? We're exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Cal Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and the NFL draft lead for the 33rd team. I want to give a special shout out and thank you to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. Here on the Locked On Network, today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/Locked On NFL and use code in all lowercase Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Now, some of the sins of the past we're going to revisit and try to learn from some of those mistakes as it pertains to the future with the Miami Dolphins. And then specifically speaking, you look at some of the player departures from this team over the past 2 seasons. And you think about players that the price went up on. The price tag continued to rise, and you ultimately saw that player then desire to reach free agency to test their market value, and they priced themselves out of your price range. Players that you would have liked to have had back. Players from the 2019 and 2020 draft class that play in the trenches and just so happen to have the brand of football and style of play that it really felt like you sorely missed this year. Now, there's a whole other conversation we had about Christian Wilkins and how he got hurt this year. And they tried to get a contract extension done with Christian, and he priced himself into a top 5 contract in all of football on the defensive side of the ball to sign with the Raiders. But if you'd have proactively got the contract done and met a different price point, it wouldn't have come to that. Same could be said for Robert Hunt at guard, who signs for $20 million per season on a 5-year, $100 million contract with the Carolina Panthers. These are the kinds of players you'd love to lock everybody in. And there was dynamics as far as who was under contract, who was not under contract. Everybody has different opinions on what contract should have come first. That's not really the focus of this show, but it's more so looking at who's under contract now for this year, after this year, that's it, that you might want to get out in front of. And I think the first thing that is important to note is that the Dolphins had no real traction for contract extensions in season this year. And I think that is in large part due to the questionable nature of the future of the team when the team is sitting, for example, at 2-6. I think it's much easier to justify giving a contract extension to Austin Jackson when you are 8-3 than it is when you are 8-3, 11 games. The Dolphins, after 11 games, they were 5-6, and you weren't quite sure. Is the team going to fall apart? Are they going to come all the way back and make the... So it certainly feels like, or at least it would make sense to understand that you would not be making multi-year decisions and future decisions if the people who are in charge weren't necessarily sure where they were going to be. You probably put a spending freeze on and say, look, we're going to finish this season out. We're going to figure out what we have. We're going to figure out where we're at. And then business can resume and pick up as usual once we make a decision on what the future of the organization looks like. And I would imagine that the decision that this team has made with the head coach and the general manager and the other power players involved in the higher ups of the football operation, they all kind of understand there's going to have to be some ideological shifts, and we'll get into that. But there's also learning from past approaches and how it has bitch in the rear end and, proactively getting contract extensions done was what prevented you from retaining those two players in particular. Now, I think there was some different decision-making process that went into the Andrew Van Ginkel decision. So I don't think that feels like it's a different thing. But you think about Zach Sieler. They proactively get Zach Sieler done. They're negotiating with Christian Wilkins, and they don't quite get it done. And then they come out with a couple of other contract extensions and updates. And, the Dolphins may have some players who performed at a very high level that desire a new contract. And that, of course, was a thing that this team had to go through with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Ramsey this past offseason amidst a resetting market. Let's not forget, both of those players got those contracts done after market resets happened. Do I think you're going to find yourself in those shoes again with a player like that? No. But there are players from either a performance perspective or from a this is your last year upcoming perspective that you might want to be proactive in getting contract extensions done. So we're going to look at the roster and look at who are expiring contracts in 2025 after the 2025 season. So who's going into their last year, their current deal, and who should you put at the front of that list? Just a couple of days ago, we did players who are expiring contracts, players that are going to hit free agency in 2 months when the league calendar year opens. And who do you want to prioritize off of that list to get back into the building on a new contract? You obviously have to address those players first because you're on a deadline. But this other group, it would probably behoove you, if you're going to get some of these deals done, to get them done before you see the market open back up and the salary cap is higher and new contracts are given. And it does what it does every year, which is the price of doing business at every position is going to go up. So we're going to look over the offensive side of the ball next here on Locked on Dolphins. Make sure that you guys stick with us. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel is making the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and a variety of bets keep the game exciting. Plus, when you get paid instantly, there's no waiting around for your winnings. Now, we are not betting on the Dolphins in the divisional round, but I kind of like the Rams plus 6.5. I liked them last week on the money line against the Vikings. I want to take the Texans plus 8.5 as well as far as the games this weekend. So there's some interesting lines over at FanDuel for you to never waste a hunch and make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com, join today, and get started with $300 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So, let's get after it. Players and expiring contracts on the offensive side of the ball as things currently stand going into 2025. Raheem Mostert will be in the last year of his deal after this upcoming season and is scheduled to be a free agent in 2026. I'd probably go the other way on that one. You can save $3 million in cap space. Raheem, it seemed like he really battled some durability stuff this year. Obviously had the fumbling issues that sprung up on the Dolphins in inopportune moments. You would carry about $1 million in dead cap and save $3 million in salary cap space if you moved on for Raheem Mostert and obviously Devon Achane, who's been a marquee player, and you traded a future 3 for Jalen Wright this past year. You'd like to think that's a player you're going to get on board and up to speed. Probably makes sense. And then you're looking at Jeff Wilson's an expiring contract that I don't think the team's going to prioritize. So you'd be looking at a third running back for the room, some competition. And the good news is those kinds of players are not hard to find. At wide receiver, it's Eric Ezukanma is an expiring contract. And really that's it. You do have Tariq Black, who signed a futures contract, but it's really a non-factor. And unfortunately, Eric Ezukanma has been a non-factor as well. So I don't think that's a player that's going to garner a lot of attention. You have 2 tight ends, though. Durham Smythe and Jonnu Smith, and you want to talk about the polar extremes of emotions for me as somebody who watches the game and analyzes the performance of all the players. You tell me the name Jonnu Smith, I get real excited because he was an outstanding addition, tailor-made for this offense. And then you tell me Durham Smythe, who's been a holdover of this team for quite some time across multiple regimes for multiple roles, and just they can't quite seem to get to a place where they replace him. I am not negotiating a new contract with Durham Smythe. If anything, I might go the Raheem Mostert proposition here and trim some fat off the roster there. You could save about $2.5 million in cap space by moving on from Durham Smythe, who was the third tight end in the pecking order, and rightfully so from a per snap performance perspective in my mind. But Jonnu Smith's an interesting one because he's going to be 30 years old this upcoming season. He was obviously outstanding. But the challenge is, are you going to do a contract extension while presumably the coach and the executive are on the hot seat and you're potentially staring down the barrel of a reset if the team underperforms again next year? Tight end is not a position where dollars go absolutely crazy, but you do now have 12 tight ends that are making an annual average salary of $10 million plus per season. Now, I don't think Jonnu Smith, as what would be a 31-year-old free agency, would get up into that stratosphere of the market, because that's names like Kelsey, Hawkinson, Kittle, Goddard, Mark Andrews, David Njoku. Cole Kmet just signed his in 2023. Evan Ingram signed a contract extension. Dalton Schultz with Houston signed in 2024 on a new deal that was 3 years, $36 million. So that's about $12 million per season. Noah Fant, who we liked this for an offseason blueprint option for the Dolphins last year. They ultimately ended up going with Jonnu Smith for less than half the cost of what Noah Fant signed for, which was $10.5 million per on a 2-year deal in Seattle. It's a player I would love to get locked in on beyond 2025, because I do think it's an opportunity to save yourself some money in the long run if you proactively do it now. Because if Jonnu comes out and has 800 plus yards again next season, regardless of the fact that he's 31, the fact that he's still a really plus and dynamic athlete, I mean, you're probably, I would guess he'd land at a top 15 contract at the position, which right now is about $8.5 million per. Do I think he's probably more valuable to the Dolphins than he is to many of the teams across the league? Yes. And I think that's case in point in the way his production exploded this year within this offense. So I think if you did what the Dolphins did last offseason with Raheem Mostert, when he was coming off of a hyper-productive breakout season, set the single season franchise record for touchdowns, they put 1 year on the back end of his current deal. If you told me you did something like that with Jonnu Smith, maybe rewarded him with some additional cash flow for this upcoming season, I would not be mad at that. And I don't think that wrecks any of your outlook for a budget of what this season could look like. I mean, Jonnu's due for less money in 2025 than he got in 2024. He got $4.3 million in cash to sign and play for the team last year. He's due for 4.09 this year. And there's roster bonuses that are available to him. There's a workout bonus for the offseason stuff. That's one that I think makes a lot of sense to maybe get another 1 year added onto the back end of that deal, or 2 years with another 1 year of guaranteed money. And you reward a player for coming in and performing at a high level, and do so before his market really potentially goes crazy if he follows it up with another year. So I think Jonnu Smith's a player that I think makes a lot of sense to get a new deal done on. But I would not be looking to do something along those lines with Durham Smythe, who appears to be being phased out of the offense. I think that tight end room does need another body in it, regardless of whether Durham Smythe is back or not. I think Julian Hill makes a lot of sense as a special teams and tight end 3 that can continue to be you could try to develop him. He's a cost controlled player. He's under contract in 2025 and then is a restricted free agent in 2026, which means you could tender him for effectively minimum salary and keep him on the roster the next 2 years. It's just a matter of, can you push him with competition to either continue to spur him to get better and more under control, or potentially usurp him with a new player to be the predominant inline player. Like you want to do as much of that across the roster as you possibly can, based on what I think this team needs from kind of a culture and temperature adjustment, if you will. On the offensive line, there's not a lot of options for contract extensions. There's really nobody of note that is an expiring contract after this season upcoming in 2025. Now, you do have a player who performed at a very high level in Aaron Brewer, but this is where the benefit of the team did give him a 3-year contract when he signed here for 3 for $21. So he has 2 years left. You're going to restructure him. I would assume you could save a significant amount of money if you do restructure him. It's going to be about $5 million that you can save in salary cap savings. And then maybe you get to 2026 if he performs at a similar level, kind of in the same boat as far as Jonnu Smith, with being such a strong scheme fit for what the Dolphins are trying to be and achieve. But you want to see more diversity in the way in which they play, and to have more confidence that the model is sustainable. It works out in their favor that they did a 3-year deal for Aaron Brewer, because I think he certainly did perform above expectation. Now, you also have Austin Jackson, who is under contract through 2026, obviously coming off of the injury. There's no urgency there. He's locked into place because he signed his deal last offseason. So really, for me, on the offensive side of the ball, it's Jonnu Smith or bust as far as getting a new contract done. And while I am leery about adding more financial commitments to that player, you do also understand if you move on from Tyreek Hill, whether it's this offseason or next offseason, you're talking about significant. He's scheduled for a $52 million cap hit, right? And if you take your lumps with it this year, move on from Tyreek Hill, you're opening up $52 million in salary cap space for 2026. And if you keep him this year, you're probably not going to touch the contract. He's going to be one of your bigger salary cap hits on the roster. And then you're tapping into and accessing probably close to $40 million in extra cap space if you move on from him after 2025. So the net here, you're certainly not going to burn all that up on Jonnu Smith for a contract extension. And you ideally, as we kind of went through yesterday with multi-year contracts, you want to hand select 3 or 4 guys that you really feel like can be really strong scheme, culture, location fits for your organization, that are guys that are coming really into the prime of their careers. And if you commit to those guys, that's the ideal, is they play out the way that the Jordan Brooks and the Aaron Brewer contract, as 3-year contracts that were given out, do. But Jonnu Smith is the one on the offensive side of the ball that makes the most sense to me. What about on defense? We're going to leave the defensive side of the ball next here on Locked On Dolphins. Stick with us. Has Rocket Money helped you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? It happens to all of us, but Rocket Money makes it easy to track all of your subscriptions down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that finds and helps cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether that is subscriptions, your spending habits, or goals for the upcoming year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Defensively, this is not an expiring contract, but it is one that I am a little bit leery on. Zach Sieler, who tied his franchise record for single-season sacks for a defensive tackle in this organization. And Zach signed a 3-year, $30 million contract extension ahead of the 2023 season. He is going to turn 30 years old on September 7th this season, so right before the start of the league year. And the thing about Zach is Zach recently, not that long ago, changed representation to Drew Rosenhaus. And if you at all follow the business side of the league, Drew Rosenhaus is one of the best. And he's done a lot of business with the Dolphins. And there has been a lot of renegotiated contracts. And the Dolphins have been a team that has been willing to play ball with their top performers for better or for worse. Here's the good news. The last thing that I'm worried about is Zach Sieler getting a new contract and taking his foot off the gas. But Zach, from a cash perspective, he is scheduled to receive less than $8 million in cash this year. Zach, for his career, like to put this into perspective. Zach, for his career thus far, has collected $26.7 million in cash as an NFL player since he came into the league as a 7th round draft pick back in 2018. Right? And he got a pretty lump sum for Miami when he signed the new deal, where it was 9.1. This past year, it was 9.8. But the way that this defensive tackle market has just absolutely exploded, I am just bracing you guys. Because Christian Wilkins, on his annual average salary of his new contract, exceeds what Zach Sieler has collected in his entire career as an NFL defensive tackle. You can look at Christian Wilkins, and the signing bonus was $24 million. Christian Wilkins' signing bonus when he signed in Las Vegas is nearly equal to what Zach Sieler has gotten in his entire NFL career. And you can make a case that Zach is a more consistent producer, at least on passing downs. You can. I think Christian's probably a better run defender. He's a little bit better at the point of attack. He's a little bit more violent, where Zach's a little bit more angular. But I mean, the discrepancy between the two is stark. And there are two defensive tackles in the league, Christian Wilkins and Chris Jones, whose annual average salary total surpasses what Zach Sieler has made in his entire career. And then you put in contracts that have been signed in the last year. Nnamdi Madubuike with Baltimore signed in 2024 contract extension off the franchise tag. His annual average salary is $24.5 million per season. Ali McNeil signed an extension in Detroit this year for $24.25 million. Let's see. You had Derek Brown signed a $24 million extension. DeForest Buckner for $23 million. Kenny Clark signed a new deal that was $21.3 million per season. Christian Barmore, $20.75 million per season. Grover Stewart for $13 million. So there's your big drop-off. Zach, his AAV currently ranks somewhere around 25th in the league for defensive tackles. For a player who's had 2 strong seasons, don't be surprised. And it's earned. And Zach is everything that you want in the right kind of player in the locker room for a team that has some of the perceptions and questions that the Dolphins do. This is the kind of player you want to reward with a new deal and reward for high performance. And the good news is some of this is already on the books. And Zach, his salary cap hit, as things currently stand for this upcoming season, is about $12 million per year. But it's 12 this year and then 11.5 next year. But don't be surprised. And if they do a new deal, this cap number can stay low. There's not a ton of prorated money that's out there for Zach. You're looking at about $3.5 million plus incentive money that's kicking in from last year. But that is one that I'd expect the player's going to want it done. And if I'm the team, I'm doing that one. And it's probably another. They've got 2 void years on the back end of the deal. Maybe you sign them through 2028. which is kind of what most of your long-term contracts right now are committed through, which includes Tua Tagovailoa's through that year, Jalen Waddle's through that year, Jalen Ramsey's through that year. Chop Robinson, obviously, is a first-round pick, is through that season. So maybe you run that one through 2028. Put 2 new years on the back end of the deal and give him a pay raise, which I think is well-deserved. Now, this is not the only member of the defensive line, though, that is an expiring contract. You have Jaelan Phillips, who's playing on his 5th-year option for $13 million in cash. But I don't think that you can justify an extension right now unless you get it somewhere in the ballpark of a per season basis of where the 5th-year option total is. And maybe that's important to Jaelan. Maybe Jaelan really wants to continue to be here as a member of the organization. And if that's the case, you're going to have a hard time really cashing in towards the top of this market. And Nick Bosa's kind of helped reset this market. He's nearly $6 million above the next highest edge rusher in the league. He's averaging 34 per season, right? That's almost 3x what Phillips is getting this year. But you got guys like Josh Hines-Allen, who just signed his deal for 28. Brian Burns got traded to the Giants last offseason, signed his for 28. TJ Watt's at 28. Myles Garrett's at 25. Bradley Chubb is the 10th highest AAV amongst defensive ends in the league, and he's at 22. If you could get a contract and without the injury guarantees, if you want to guarantee this year because you're guaranteed and committed to it anyway, if you want to guarantee next year and then you wanted to add 2 years of non-guaranteed on the back end of it and guarantee about 50% of the contract, which is a reasonable amount, but if the AAV is going to check in around $15 million, like, I'm totally cool, because if Jaelan Phillips come back and is healthy and they run back the pass rush room and he's playing with Chop Robinson and Zach Sieler and whoever else is the other defensive tackle, and if they decide to keep Bradley Chubb, there's the potential here for him to break out and be an absolute monster. He was on pace to be a 15-sack guy in 2023 before he got hurt. And you obviously want to see that before you commit the big time dollars to it. But it is the one that I think most closely reflects, other than the injury issues, the kind of contract that ballooned on you and got out of control the way that Christian and Rob Hunt did if Jaelan Phillips stays healthy this year. So I would talk some business here. And if you want to land in the Jonathan Cooper, Zach Allen, Alex Highsmith, Hassan Reddick, Matthew Judon kind of stratosphere, which is $14 to $16 million per season, and you're not talking 3 years full of guarantees, I think it's probably worth exploring and trying to be proactive if you have faith that Jaelan Phillips and his recovery is where it needs to be for him to be that kind of player for you. Kendall Fuller in the secondary is the prominent expiring contract in the secondary. And just based off of his age, kind of the way that this season played out, I do think they maybe have a strategic decision there to make, as far as, we're presuming they're probably going to bring back Kader Kohu, who's a restricted free agent. They seem to like Storm Duck. You've got Cam Smith. I think you need another veteran, but would you go a different direction than Kendall Fuller and save a couple $1 million if you moved on and take your losses after year one, as compared to giving him a new contract? I think he more fits the mold of the Raheem Mostert, Durham Smythe type of players, an expiring contract that I would not proactively get out in front. So that's your list on both sides of the ball. You're looking at Jonnu Smith and Jaelan Phillips are the prominent expiring contracts on either side. Obviously, very different backgrounds. One player dealing with injury issues, another player coming off of a career best season, but it's tailor-made for the offense. So there's some complexities of the security of the brain trust in the direction of the football team. And then you have a high-performing player that is far outperforming his contract and has outperformed each of his of the 2 years that he's played under this contract. He continues to be one of the best steals in football. And the fact that he changed his representation kind of gives me some level of inkling that title he may be conceding, because he's going to be looking for a new contract. So those are the names for me. Earlier this week, we did players that are expiring contracts I'd want to get business on top of first. This is the group of guys that I would want to proactively try to explore the viability of getting a fair but cost-controlled contract extension done at a price point that is not going to be at the mercy of what the market looks like in 2 months when the league calendar year opens, because that, as it always does, is going to get bananas. That's going to do it for us here on the show. Hope you guys enjoyed this peek at 2025 players in contract years and ones that I would try to get a contract extension done with. That's going to do it for us on the show. Kyle Krabs, keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Fins up. Appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show.